Hi everyone, I'm Sandy, and today I'm back with my 1001 book countdown, and I have one great book and one okay book. But let's go ahead and get to it. So as always, if you're not familiar with the 1001 book countdown, I will leave a card up here for you where I go through the idea in a lot of detail, and you can find out everything about it. But basically, it's book reviews off of books off of the 1001 books you must read before you die list. I am having a huge amount of fun reading books off of that list, and even if some of the books are not my favorite, I still am really enjoying the experience, and I love the amount of progress that I've been making. So yeah, if you're enjoying my journey as well, consider giving me a subscribe and a like and a comment if you've read any of the books or would like to read any of the books. I certainly would love to hear from you, but for today we're going to go ahead and put up our numbers, which are 971 and 17, which is of course my 2021 number, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into the books. Yay! Okay, so the first book on the list I actually have been reading since the beginning of August. I've been doing this as a buddy read with Amy over AStar Reads and Bethanne Bruniga-Socolar. I will leave both of their channels linked in the description for you, and absolutely please go check them out because they're both wonderful. I am definitely way ahead, well not way ahead, but I am ahead of them on this book, and I did finish it a little bit early, but I do want to go ahead and talk about it before all of the details run out of my brain, which frequently happens. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Mysteries of Udolpho by Ann Radcliffe. So this book was originally published in 1794 and is about somewhere in the middle of her works, though I would argue that this is probably her most famous or her famous work, is The Mysteries of Udolpho. And so this book is a kind of gothic romance novel, being that it's over 200 years old. The story really does hold up quite a bit in modern times, which I thought was really fascinating. It follows a lovely woman whose name is Emily. And Emily in volume 1 has just lost her mother. That happens in the very first couple of pages. So don't consider that a spoiler. And then she continues to have more and more kind of catastrophic losses in her family, and ultimately is transferred under the care of her aunt. And then there's also, a love interest in the form of a character whose name is Valancourt, and Valancourt and Emily have a very teenage angsty kind of relationship in the beginning. And when she's transferred under to the care of her aunt decides she does not like Valancourt at all and thinks that Emily is being very improper, and decides that she's going to take Emily away to her new husband's home, which happens to be the Castle Udolpho I believe in Italy. And so Emily ends up on an adventure going to a completely foreign land with people that she hasn't spent a whole lot of time with. There's a lot of mystical kind of things that happen, or things that Emily's imagination makes happen. But largely this is a gothic kind of thriller romance novel, and there is a lot of that in here, especially for poor Emily, who is proposed to more than one potential suitor. Her new uncle is not the most upstanding of gentlemen, we shall say, and puts her in some very precarious circumstances, and she ends up having to navigate all of that, I will say, without trying to spoil the book for you. It is absolutely a delightful read, though, but it is a chunky book. I mean, it did take me 6 weeks to kind of make my way through this book, and I do read very, very fast, but I tried to read it at about the 20 page per day mark to really get to spend some time with this book and enjoy this book. I first heard about this book in Northanger Abbey and really wanted to read it ever since then, and I'm so glad that I did pick it up. If you do pick up this book, know it's separated into 4 volumes. And the first volume is probably the slowest, and is one that is very, very difficult to kind of just really continue through. Work your way through the first volume, because volume 2 goes completely in a different direction, and it was by far my favorite volume. And then volume 3 really picked up as well. So don't judge the book by the first volume, because the first volume was definitely very, very difficult to get through. But it is 100% a book that I would recommend you that you read. It is one of my favorite ones that I've read off of the 1001 book countdown list, even though it did take me quite a bit of time to make my way through it. It is one that I think is well worth your time. If you don't read a lot of classics, I wouldn't probably start with this one, because it does take some time to work your way through, without a doubt, and because it is a chunkier one, but it has a really interesting story, and there's a lot to unpack in it, and I can see how it influenced Northanger Abbey quite a bit. There are some things in here that I think that Amy at AStar Reads pointed out, of how Emily and the women seem to faint a lot. That was one of those things, like anytime anything distressing happened, oh, there goes Emily, she's fainting again. Okay, sure. Why not? But there is some, death, and there's some intrigue and some backstabbing and some just problematic stuff in this book, but it made it even more delightful. But that is the first book I have to talk to you about, Mysteries of Udolpho by Ann Radcliffe. This, like I said, I gave it, I believe, between 4 and 4.5 stars. Absolutely take your time with it, because it is one that you can't really rush. There are some scenes at the castle that are really, just really, not fun, but just the language, like screaming with terror, they both fled and got out of the chamber as fast as their trembling limbs would bear them, leaving open the doors of all the rooms through which they passed. I just think that's really fun. There is, one of the other things with this book, as I'm reading through the notes, Emily is very, very smart at one point, and the way she questions her new uncle in this is so incredibly, incredibly clever. He's trying to convince her to do something, and she's just recognizing, well, if it doesn't mean anything, because he's told her, oh no, that doesn't mean anything, you don't have to worry about it, but sign it anyway. And she definitely comes back and is like, really? Because it feels like I shouldn't be signing this. But yeah, it is absolutely a delightful book. I highly recommend it. And with that, though, we get to reduce numbers. With that, we go from I don't know where my things are, 971 to 970 and 17 to 16, because yes, it is on my 2021 list, which makes me incredibly, incredibly happy. Okay, so the second book on the list is, unfortunately, it is the one that has just a little bit of a disappointment in, because it was rated the highest book on the list, according to Goodreads. Now, that could be because there's not as many reviews. It could be, just any number of reasons why. This is a translated book as well, and that may have something to do with it. It's translated from Bulgarian by Robert Sturm, and that book is the one I had some hard time finding, which is a Ballad for Georg Henig, by Viktor Paskov. I've been calling it George. I did this as a buddy read with one of my subscriber, and she called it Georg, which I think she's probably absolutely 100% correct in how you pronounce the name. This book started off really, really strong. There's a young boy whose name is Viktor, and he lives with his mother and father, and they decide that they want to get him a violin, but he is very, very small, and they go to Georg, who is a master violin maker, for him to make a very unusual size of a violin, which is a 1/8 size violin. I know nothing about violins. I have no idea if that's unusual or not, but that's the basic premise of the book. And they hope that poor Viktor will be a superstar violin player. And Viktor just never really picks up on it. And you first are introduced to Georg there, and then you go some time before you really kind of meet Georg again. It goes back to the family. They're very, very poor. They live in a very poor neighborhood. They describe how people will loan money kind of in a circle as it goes around the neighborhood. And his wife, or Viktor's mother, wants basically to have a sideboard. And a sideboard is kind of like a buffet kind of table, is when I researched it, that's what it was. And in here you see, and I ask, if poverty is not an illness, what is? So there's a couple of different things about just poverty, and how Viktor is actually proud of being poor. And when his father decides that he's going to make a sideboard for his wife, and once that starts, they slowly start to be looked at differently in the neighborhood, and Viktor is very unhappy that they're not going to be considered as poor as everyone else. But they decide to make a sideboard versus buying one, and they end up at Georg's workshop. And Georg is not in good shape at this point. He is basically very frail and is not doing very well. And the family tries to help revive him essentially and bring him kind of back to life. And Viktor spends quite a bit of time at Georg's house while his dad is making the sideboard and really gets to know him. The relationship between Viktor and Georg was lovely, absolutely lovely, and how much time he just really wanted to spend with him. I really appreciated that part of it. I think that this book also, I forgot to mention, was published in 1988, so it's about, 33 years old now. So it's not that old. I think that just the relationship between the boy and Georg was, like I said, very, very, very lovely, and how they treated him and how they respected him and how they tried to do so much to help him stay in his home, help him eat. They brought him meals every day while the sideboard was being made. They tried, to get other people to help him by contributing funds so he had enough money to stay there, because there's some people who wanted him out. And Georg just really didn't want to live with someone else. He didn't want to move into their house. He was very adamant about that, wanted to stay. And then there comes a point where they end up having to move him. And it's not his choice to go. He won't move in with the family. So he ends up moving to what I can only describe as kind of like a rest home kind of environment, and they have very limited contact with him from that point forward, and it's very sad from that perspective. But the book really fell apart kind of about the time the sideboard went home to the family, because then you just don't get the same relationship building that you had in the beginning of the book. You had that way more at the start. I'm not sure, again, why this is rated so highly on Goodreads. If it's, like I said, there's a small number of reviews on it, and that's what lends to it. I understand from my buddy reader that this author is very beloved in their home country, and that could have something to do with it. But maybe, and it could be something in translation. This cover is a very plain cover. I'll put up a screenshot of the cover that I couldn't find anywhere. And maybe, I don't know if there's something in this translation that maybe didn't work, and that's why. But it was, unfortunately, just a tiny bit of a disappointment considering how high it was rated on Goodreads. I put it, I believe, right about at the 3-star mark, primarily because the second half just really, really let me down, unfortunately. But thank you so much to my buddy reader who, one, helped me find this book, because you can't buy this in the US very easily. I found it on an amazon.co.uk website and paid probably way too much for it, but thank you to a couple of my subscribers actually who gave me recommendations on where to find this. So I do really appreciate that. We did read this over a couple of weeks, and it is very short, so I did spend quite a bit of time with it. But yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment, unfortunately. But the Ballad for Georg Henig. So that's why I said one really good book in The Mysteries of Udolpho and one okay book in this one. But with that, I have to look at my numbers again. I do go from 970 to 969 and from 16 to 15. So for 2021, I am in fantastic shape because I only have 15 books and there's 15 weeks left. I have a very good chance of finishing the books on my 2021 list, which I am incredibly happy about. One of those I have mentioned before, which is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. As you can see here, I am well into the 5th day of this book. And this one I am really enjoying being part of 2 different groups, because it's interesting how you get different comments in the different groups for this book. I am right on track. I'd like to finish this book next week and have this one in my countdown next weekend. So 1 book per week for the rest of the year seems reasonable. We'll see if it actually is. I may also change how I select the books that I'm going to read next, as I am feeling a little bit like I don't like how I'm drawing and kind of having no control over the books that I'm selecting next, because there are some books that are kind of natural pairings, and I'm missing out on being able to talk to those together. So I may change it. I haven't fully decided yet. We'll see. A great example of that is that I am currently reading Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand with Shelly Swearingen. I'm having an absolute fantastic time talking to her about this book. And I have a book in my 2021 list called Under Fire that I would love to be able to read because it's also a World War II novel and I haven't drawn it yet. And I just feel like I should read the one that I want to read with that one. So I'm still playing with it. We'll see what I end up doing. And then, yeah, but that was my update for the 1001 book countdown. And as always, I will point, even though I don't know where I'm pointing, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, thanks. Bye.